Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, a bit of an overcast day. Thought I might do something a bit more fun, so I've just got some polyurethane spacers to lift this Nissan Safari 2 inches. I've got the front wheel off already. I borrowed these tyres off my brother. We're up in the bush. So first time up in the bush with it, a week ago. So these here are the urethane spacers. So I'm not sure which way around it goes, but the front and rear springs are slightly different diameter. So yeah, they're going to lift it up that much. So let's get on with it. So what we've got to do is at the moment I've got the jack holding the diff up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a jack stand under there holding the body up, and I'm going to undo this nut here on the shock, and we're going to let the diff down using the jack, and that will allow it to take the weight off the spring, and we're going to be able to put the spacer in. So it's got to come down 50mm to go. I'm not sure whether it goes in the top or bottom. I'm going to work that out as I go. So we'll just see what happens. Put a Stilson's onto here to hold the shock from spinning while I'm undoing it. I can't get a ratchet onto here, and I don't have a ratchet spanner because that lower steering arm's in the way. But that's alright, I'll get in there. Rubber bush. Right, so what I've discovered is that I needed to take off the other wheel and drop the diff down so it was level, because the spring, because it was articulated, it was jamming up on what it sits on, and now I've got to a point where I need to undo the diff breather, which is that line there, and then over on top of the diff the brake line comes down. Need to undo that so that it has a bit more length, so I can get the diff down lower, because I've got to get down low enough so that I can get 50mm of spacer in there. And what was stopping it going down was the brake line, so I'm going to undo that. Hopefully just by undoing it is enough to give it a bit of room to move. I don't want to have to disconnect it and have to bleed the brakes. We've got both spacers now in the front. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to jack the diff back up so I can hook the shock up, and the shock will prevent it from coming out because it can't extend past the end of the shock, and that's the end of the shock there, so it's got to come up another inch before I can do it fully up. You can see there, it's got to come up an inch. Yeah, so I'm about to jack that up. Do that back up. So this these polyurethane blocks. I think they're about 130 from Australia for front and rear. So that's a pretty cheap lift, because if you go and get, you know, a professional to do it, well, not even to do it, but just you know, if you went and got new springs and new shocks and then you put them in yourself, it's still like a $1,500 plus exercise to lift it. So I didn't want to spend that much money for just a bit of fun. So we got these polyurethane spacers, which I think will work a treat. This side, when I was pulling the spring up, the bump stop came out with it. So if I find that it's bottoming out on this side, I'm going to have to get a new one to bolt in. They just go up inside and they bolt into the top. But the piece that it normally sits on's up there. So I've just got to get this side bolted up. Better put them around the right way this time. Had them on the direction was the wrong way. That's pretty good. 2 inches of lift. Nice. Right, so with the back, you got to just disconnect the rear shock, which is just, it's a nut that goes on to there. Remove the shock, and then we just drop it down the same as the front. I may have to disconnect the sway bar to get it to drop lower, and same with the brake line and breather in there. It's hard to see, but the brake line might be alright, but the diff breather might need to be undone. Tight. Right, so there we have it all done. You can see the shocks. That part of the shock has never seen daylight. And then you can see the spacer in there. So it actually makes quite a big difference to the appearance of the vehicle, and it feels taller when you hop in, even though it's only 50mm. It actually makes quite a big difference. So one day I might get around to doing a body lift, maybe. It is just fun, it's not too serious. Wouldn't mind putting a turbo on one day. It's probably one thing that I would like to do more than anything else. Yeah, but it's pretty blooming cool right now. Right, so that's it for this afternoon. Working on the Safari. And I think we've got to go and fix a ball cock, fix a water leak, and then I'm done for the day. So we'll catch you somewhere else on the farm. See ya.